I suppose we should just jump right into it. I can't start with that, though.
So here we are, talking to our computers. I remember when I used to stream, I never knew how to start it, so I'd just, like, flip on the webcam, and I'd be like, hi, here I am. I'm going to start streaming now. Hello.
I'm Zutazuta. Let's go.
It's so awkward, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what to say.
Did you used to stream Age of Empires Online?
Yeah. Hella Age of Empires Online.
That's what I wanted to talk about initially, right? It's been in the news, kind of. Well, not really. It's like, well, at least I thought it had been. I was, like, looking through my phone, and I get this push notification from Give You Anxiety stream saying he's live, playing Age of Empires Online, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'm pretty sure that's now Age of Empires Offline.
Yeah, sure.
But there he was. And then I noticed Steam. Azamp he's on my Steam friends list, and it said, oh, Azamp is playing Age of Empires Online. And I thought, oh god, I've missed something. I've missed
some big renaissance.
Microsoft have announced Age of Empires Online Resurrected Edition or something. Like, what is this? You can now play Age of Empires Online again. So I checked out this VOD on Give You Anxiety's stream, and I noticed that actually it looks. This isn't something official at all. Well, the reason I thought it was, like, something official was because, I guess that was just my natural reaction to it, but, like, I don't use Facebook at all anymore, and that was my main source of knowledge for Age of Empires stuff. I'd get it from, like, the official Age of Empires page. So I didn't know about this. But actually, what it is, it looks, like, pretty illegal, actually.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's definitely a hacky workaround to, like, make the game work.
Yeah, so for those that don't, are listening to this and don't want to check out the VOD or anything like that, basically I looked at this VOD and it was a Give You Anxiety stream, and it was Age of Empires Online, but in the Age of Empires 3 scenario editor. And you could, like, that's all it is, it's a scenario editor. Like, this isn't the Age of Empires Online game. I believe it's just, like, some very old beta that they found lying around, this guy, and he just managed to get it working in the Age of Empires 3 scenario editor. Now there's people building custom scenarios and stuff for it, and there's... Yeah, so what do you know about this, Zuta?
I stumbled upon this probably about the same time as you did, like a day or two ago. I saw Give You Anxiety posted that thread on ESO community, and I did a little bit of looking at it, and basically what it looks like this guy has done is he's found some way to access, like, the old beta servers for Spartan. Back before it was Age of Empires Online, it was codenamed Spartan, and he was able to pull the old beta files and basically get around any sort of, like, DRM, like, with that old build by just basically, like, kind of hackily launching the game into the scenario editor, and then, like you said, loading up scenarios and being able to play them.
Would you like to explain what DRM is? I've heard that term before, and I'm not...
An example of a DRM is Steam, right? They buy the rights to resell the game, and as a result, like, they wrap it in what's called DRM, which basically is like a lock around the game that says you can only access this game if you've been playing it on Steam. So more examples of a DRM would be like Games for Windows Live.
Yeah, I know that you can't play Age of Empires Online without the launcher. That was like a big deal.
Yeah.
And obviously that doesn't exist anymore because the servers are shut down and that's owned by Microsoft. And so, like, it makes sense that they launched it into Age of Empires 3 to like, get around that DRM. But is it, like, fully functional? Like
Certainly no online content currently available. Like, obviously that requires a server and having packets being sent to the server and like, reconstructing all that traffic would be another huge project all in itself, which, by the sounds of it, he's actually attempting to do as well.
Oh, wow.
But for the time being, he's got it working. I watched or conversed with A's about it a little bit. He certainly is very technically inclined as well with all the UI stuff he's done, and he was trying to make some of his own scenarios and make it work, and was having some difficulties with it. I don't think it's certainly a very smooth process right now, but it's something that's at least interesting, because the fact that there's still someone who cares enough to put that much effort into it is really, really interesting, because obviously that game was a game that was very near and dear to my heart, and just seeing that there's like other people who still care that much about it is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I was thinking this as well, and as I mentioned, this is not a legal thing. I don't really think Microsoft give two flying shits either way, because they're not making any money off it. I mean, it is their intellectual property, and if the guy tried to sell it or start charging money or advertising it, or
it's a fine line, right? Because if you think about basically what all of the fan patches have ever tried to accomplish, and things like the ESO community cheat protection, stuff like that, all of the patch launchers that we've made for AoE 3 in the past, all of those things kind of walk that same fine line of like what's legal, what's not legal, right? You're kind of mooping around in some of the EXEs and editing some code that technically you
aren't allowed to do in the user agreement.
Microsoft so far has, never said anything, and in fact they've been quite fair and quite open with allowing people to support the game in the ways that they have. As a result, I don't think that they'll mind too much, but this is once again walking even a thinner line of legality, right? Because this is a game that's turned off, no longer supported, has been end-of-lifed, whereas Age of Empires 3 still has some official support and stuff like that.
I think, for me, the big difference here is that Age of Empires 3 is, a game you can buy on Steam, right? It feels like the patches, they're not really doing any harm. In fact, they might even be doing good for sales. They're keeping the current user base interested, and the current user base seems to do a good job of encouraging new people to join. At least in my experience, that has been the case. But this is effectively taking Microsoft's property and then distributing it, and they might not like that. But yeah, I want to get back to what I was saying earlier. So someone's gone through this effort to put the game, into a playable
format. Yeah,
that goes to show that there is at least somebody who is interested in playing Age of Empires Online. And I'm not saying that this would cause Microsoft to go ahead and start, making a resurrected edition. I kind of called it earlier, and I have been calling. The point is, they made their Age of Empires 2 HD edition that came out, and that was a project that they had a company called Skylabs or Skybox, something like that. They had them do that. And I heard that was quite a lot of work. They had a very similar project, Age of Mythology Extended Edition.
Yeah.
If this picks up a lot of traction, if people are interested in playing Age of Empires Online, maybe Microsoft do go ahead and start thinking about at least thinking about, do we put this game back on Steam? I mean, they still own I'm sure they have all the source code and everything, and it's still theirs, and it still exists somewhere on some sort of drive they have somewhere. So there's that. But I think the interesting thing, and Zuta, you can probably answer this question. What happened? Why was this not massively successful, or the successor as, the next generation Age of Empires experience we'd all been waiting for? I mean, it's a game that I tried very briefly when it came out, and I thought, this is fun. This is an interesting aesthetic. This is certainly not the upgraded Age of Empires 4 Second Coming of Jesus
that we were all hoping for, right? Yeah.
That I thought would resurrect the series, and would, bring thousands of people back, just like the glory days when Age of Empires 3 came out. It didn't seem to be that game. And I do wonder why, because it was a very interesting concept, right? What I kind of called it, or I think they may have called it themselves, by they I mean Microsoft, was an MMORPG RTS or something like that. It was like a massively multiplayer online real-time strategy game, which was like a genre that's never been done before. My thoughts on this not becoming this, as I called it, Second Coming of Jesus, was the fans seem to be disappointed by, I think a lot of people would criticize it for its graphics, although I don't think that's a fair term, because the graphics are actually quite good. What it is that they ought to be criticizing is the aesthetic. Clearly it's a cartoony style. It's not the same as the realism that Age of Empires 3 and Age of Empires 2 and all the other Age of Empires have gone for, and Age of Empires 3 is obviously the one that achieved that best. This has gone for something much more fun, I suppose. And also, I believe the game launched with sort of a lack of what I would call traditional Age of Empires multiplayer. You couldn't have a 1v1 or a 2v2 in the same way. You had this sort of, what I would describe as a fairly weird kind of questing system, which kind of makes sense given the sort of genre they were going for. But it seemed odd to me to launch an Age of Empires game without an Age of Empires sort of gameplay model.
So there's a couple of big opinions that I have on this. The first thing, like you mentioned, I think they did poorly with the launch of the game, is, like you've said, they essentially kind of abandoned one of their original big followings, right? Of the people who wanted just good core PvP play with good graphics, realistic looking, medieval-ish graphics, and Not a lot of work, not a lot of barrier to entry, just immediately able to play. Didn't have to do anything on the side, didn't have to level anything up. You could just buy the game, sit down, and start to play immediately. And that was not available at launch of the game. Now, they did add some features later on that essentially did just that, but it was kind of wrapped and hidden behind this like big MMO that a lot of people, I think, kind of got frightened away of. And as a result, they lost out on some of their key market, some of their original big fans, the people who would have gladly switched from AOM, AoE 3, AoE 2 and started to play the game, just never got interested in it as a result. And I think for those of us who stuck it out and continued to support the game and continued to play the game and kind of got through those first hurdles of the frustrations of having to like buy gear and get your civilization geared up to be able to play, and eventually sticking it out to see champion mode PvP, which was essentially gearless PvP, just like any other Age of Empires game is, and came to see all the good leaderboards and what was called Sparta, which is effectively like quick search, and knew how to navigate the UI that was, you know, kind of the MMO-y feel of like having to travel to different cities to like play PvP and stuff like that. Once you got over all of that and got past the fact that that existed and was something that this game was trying to do, it really became a quite good game. The actual gameplay, when you got into it, was very crisp, very fast. I really enjoyed the way that the game like actually played out. I thought it was a nice, unique balance between kind of like Age of Empires 3 gameplay, where, you know, there's a very hard, heavy counter system in units. Positioning is very, very important. And kind of the Age of Mythology, Age of Empires 2, single batch unit training, multiple buildings, lots more flexibility, kind of a macro-y style. And I thought the actual gameplay itself was really, really good. And I think anyone who stuck it out and actually played PvP, people like myself, Give You Anxiety, Soldier, The Mist, you know, some of the other really good high-level players who had played previous Age games, once we all got past the fact that there was this kind of MMO wrapper around our game, we sort of realized that it's actually a pretty damn good game underneath it all. And I think a lot of people had a difficult time getting around that.
Like, something I want to talk about more is this MMO wrapper you mentioned.
Yeah.
So for those of you who have played World of Warcraft and those of you who have played RuneScape, maybe you only played those games for the PvP. You know, that was the only thing that interested you. But there were all these other lands you could go to, and you know, you could go questing and all of these things, and you pick up gear and what have you. But the one I want to focus on is something about RuneScape that I mentioned. Like, there's the Jewel Arena. That's where you go to have a fight.
Yeah.
And this Age of Empires game was not like you sign into the lobby and then
there's a tab that says quick search, or something like that.
Yeah, it's not like that. It's like you sign in, you spawn in your hometown, which is the city, your home city or whatever it is. And then you can travel to, I think you mentioned Sparta, or you can travel to somewhere else. It's like it's all wrapped up in this, and that makes sense given the genre they were trying to create. But I think you knocked the nail on the head there, where you said maybe they scared away some of the core audience before that they, the original Age of Empires audience, I suppose.
Yeah, before they were willing to give it a chance, right? And like I mentioned, the other important thing was previously they were trying to push like those MMO elements where in order to play PvP, you did have to have a full set of gear. Like, the actual stat bonuses and unique bonuses that you got from gear applied in-game. And the only way you could get gear, right, was you got gear from leveling up your city, which was a very slow and painful process that had to be done initially only from quests, meaning that you essentially had to play a fair...
And can you tell us what quests are?
Yeah, they're campaigns, right? It's campaigns. You had to play the campaign before you could even realistically attempt to play PvP. And you not only had to play the campaign, but you had to play like a lot of the campaign, and you had to play it repetitively in order to generate enough resources, coin, chests, stuff like that, to unlock all of the good gear.
Yep.
And only once you had all of the best gear could you be guaranteed to have a fair game against another opponent. And I mean, that whole process before, the gearless PvP mode was released took forever. It legitimately took probably 40 hours of conceited effort into just grinding, getting gear, getting the money, getting the chests, and people didn't want to do that. Hell, I didn't want to do that, right? Like, it took forever. Now, fortunately, for a large portion, especially of the beta, they didn't have to go through all of that necessarily, but for so many people and so many people who just wanted to play PvP, I mean, if you told anyone who was interested in Age of Empires 3 for its PvP that you had to play all of the campaign missions 3 times through before you would even be allowed to play 1v1, they'd say, well, forget about it, right? I'm not gonna do this. It's a waste of my time. Like, why would I ever want to do that?
Yep. And that's the original Age of Empires audience, right? And Age of Empires 3 touches on that with the leveling up your home city, but I don't think that's as nearly as egregious and is still an interesting...
You say that, sorry to cut you off, you say that, but at the same time, you're aware that the 400 wood politicians and some of the very important politicians are not unlocked until you get to level 40 with some civilizations, right?
Oh, that's definitely true.
So, for new people, there is some barrier to entry for Age of Empires 3 as well.
I want to continue to talk about the gameplay. I agree with you. I didn't play too much of it, but it definitely felt like an Age of Empires game, like a modern Age of Empires game, like a modern game, actually. Like, everything was responsive, slick, crisp, all these words that you mentioned. I mean, Age of Empires 3 is as well. But if I'm being honest, I do think Age of Empires Online was a better playing game. Certainly it was a newer game, and I think it would fit very well, or at least be a somewhat profitable venture for Microsoft to bring it back. Maybe more as a PvP only, forget about the MMO, more traditional Age of Empires game, bring it back like that, but... I don't know about the listeners, but I think I'd really like to experience that properly. You know, I never really was able to back then, or at least I didn't get that far into it. This first episode of the Zuterjection podcast is sponsored by Google Apps. Now, I'm really pleased to have Google as a sponsor. Obviously, as a YouTuber, I use their software all the time, and something I really couldn't live without anymore is Google Apps. Now, most of you probably don't know it as Google Apps, but I'm talking about Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Forms, etc. Really useful collaborative tools. And if you haven't heard of any of these, then sharing documents online with your friends and family, co-workers and colleagues is about to become a lot easier for you. Google Docs is effectively a word processing program that you can open absolutely anywhere from your web browser. It offers almost exactly the same features that you'd expect from something like Microsoft Word. At least so far, I personally haven't found anything that's missing. And because it's online, you can access any document you've written anywhere from whatever computer you happen to be using, whether that be at work or at home. No need to remember memory sticks or emailing it to yourself, none of that. And if you want to, just share the URL of the document you're working on with anyone you like, and they can see it too. They can even see you changing it as you're typing, and if you give their account permission, they can edit it with you as well at any time, any place, even if you're on opposite sides of an ocean. Like, for example, me and Zuta. For this podcast and future episodes as well, we have a document shared between us where we jot down ideas for whenever they come to us and whatever they might be. We just tap a button on our phone or open a tab on our PC, wherever we are, and we can add whatever it is to that file so we don't forget what we want to talk about in future episodes. Most of the time, I personally use Google Docs for writing essays and video scripts, such as this one, and that's because, and this is the best thing about it, unlike Microsoft Word, for home users, Google Apps is absolutely free of charge. And for business owners, it's significantly cheaper than a Microsoft Studios license or anything like that. About as much as a coffee, just £3.30 per user per month. That's $5 or €4, whatever currency you're using. Google Docs is a much cheaper, collaboratively more useful alternative to those more expensive programs out there that doesn't need installation, updating, doesn't need to load, anything like that. It's always available immediately, just like Google, no time wasted. If you're interested, please do check out my referral link, as that does help me out a lot. You can find that in the show notes below. My thanks to Google for sponsoring our podcast. Do you want to tell us why? What is this fondness for the game? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so I worked at Microsoft, right, which was a big part of why I enjoyed the game so much and why I kept with it and why it has holds such an important spot for me in like my gaming life, just because it was the first, I would say, like the first real job. So we've all had like jobs, right? I mean, you're the newspaper boy when you're 6, and you're maybe you work at McDonald's frying hamburgers when you turn 15, and maybe you're a lifeguard at the pool, right? They're jobs, but they're not like real jobs, right? They're not like part of your adult life jobs. And
like
my
career,
first,
in a way.
yeah, they're not something that you could see yourself doing for the rest of your life, right? And for me, I got offered this job to be a member of the balance team by Microsoft as a result of some of the work that we had done on FanPatch, which we can go back and talk about later. But
What, do you want to talk about it now? And then we
do you want to talk about FanPatch? I mean, we can talk about FanPatch.
So what I would like to say is, because you said you have a fondness for this game, and that's because you worked on it. You were employed at Microsoft as a beta tester. That was your job. And I think a lot of people would be very interested, I know I certainly was, as to how you came to get that. You did just mention FanPatch. Can you tell us from the very beginning?
All right, so we'll start in 2005, where young Zutazuta picked up his first copy of Age of Empires 3, fell in love with it, and played it essentially every day of his life up until this present day, right? It's been a very influential game for me ever since I was 15.
Yeah.
Starting in 2008, the game was officially dropped for support. There was going to be no more patches. There was the whole ES is disbanding, Robot Entertainment is starting up. Microsoft has officially said that, nothing more is going to happen with Age of Empires 3. They've cut the studio that was in charge of developing it, yada, 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 all that important stuff. And there was a community, RTS Sanctuary, at the time it was called AgeSanctuary.com, that similar to like right now, where we're at right now.
Like with eso-community.net.
Yeah, a very strong core of high-level players who had an interest in continuing to see the development of the game. The game was nowhere near polished. There was severe imbalance. Civilizations like Japan, India were completely top tier. There was really no realistic sense of balance at a high level, and there was still a ton of interest in players playing it at a high level. We wanted to still have tournaments. We wanted to see the game continue to improve, and when Microsoft said, Ensemble Studios is not going to have any part in this game moving forward, there was a movement within the community to actually make a fan-made patch that would essentially help to try and mitigate some of the issues that the game was currently seeing. And I wasn't actually a part of that original team.
And just to clear up anyone being a bit confused, and I know that would be probably no one, but this was back in 2008. This is not the FanPatch, the recent one at least. This is
2008.
The original, the OG FanPatch.
No, this is 2008. This is 8 years ago. Yeah, FanPatch OG. We way back in 2008, and so it was led by two guys named Viper and Damnit. And for anyone who's listening and a fan of the game and is an Age of Empires 3 historian like myself, those are some throwback names right there. But they were kind of the two architects of the original patch. They were in charge of leading the discussions around, what was considered balance and stuff like that. And they had a team of high-level testers, Samwise 12, Fluky, Chalet, a bunch of the old, good, high-level players from back in the day, helping them balance it, playing test games, iterating on patches that would eventually drive into what was released as FanPatch 1.0. And that patch was released, and like any patch, right, eventually, what do you find with a patch? You find flaws. And just like any game, you can only play a patch so many times before you find flaws. And so there was flaws in it, and there needed to be more iteration on it, right? And so that's kind of where I picked up. I started taking over as the actual lead of the project in terms of organizing the players. I was by no means the best player or even qualified to consider myself, a fan patch test player at that point, but I helped organize and architect all of the forum interactions that the players were having and making sure that people were showing up to actually test the game. I mean, hell, we had schedules for when we were going to show up on Saturday afternoons to actually play test the game and stuff like that. And so working on that aspect, and Fan Patch 1.1 was released, and then similarly, you have to keep iterating, and then we worked on Fan Patch 1.2. And by the time Fan Patch 1.2 actually got into development, I was good enough at the game. Now, mind you, this was over the course of 2 years that all of these Fan Patch changes were taking place. 2008 to 2010, 2011 even is when I think we released the last iteration of Fan Patch 1.2. And by the time Fan Patch 1.2 was around, I was actually playtesting the game myself. I had worked myself up to a respectable enough PR where I felt like my opinions actually, in terms of balance and not just organization and getting people to show up and stuff like that, actually mattered. And then we released Fan Patch 1.2, and we had moderate levels of success with it. But in Interjection, I'm going to ask you, what's the next step? What do you do when you've got a fan patch and you want everyone to play it?
Well, you post about it.
You post about it, and who do you talk to? Who's the most important person that you can talk to help support your game?
The makers of the game.
The makers of the game, right? Microsoft. If there was some way, some miracle of God that could bestow upon you everyone playing your patch, it would be
the makers of the game. Yeah.
To have this patch be the makers of the game, making this thing be the original patch, right? And that was the goal. That was what I wanted. I wanted that so badly.
Oh, and this was the goal from the get-go, right? You developed it. It was created with that in mind, I would imagine, and everyone maybe took it even as a given or for granted that would be the case and that would happen.
Well, and so we, starting in 2010 or 2011, I think spring of 2011, we started talking the ears off of Microsoft, spamming them on their official forums. I had, some of the email addresses of their community members, and I was spamming them almost daily, saying like, "Hey, like, get me into some sort of a Skype call with someone who can make this happen. We've got the patch. Hell, I'll fly out to your office and like do whatever I need to do to like prove to you this is a legit patch. It will improve the game, and everyone will be better for it." And unfortunately, they said no. They kept saying no. They kept saying no.
Did they have any reason to, like, did they tell you anything in particular why they couldn't do it, or they didn't want to do it, or they didn't, they felt like it would just, making everyone update would cost them resources or something? Like, what did they say to you? I have no idea why they would turn that down. That sounds like a win-win for everyone.
They kind of always just hid it behind boilerplate of like, we're sorry, it's not something we're able to do at this time. Like, we appreciate your efforts and everything that you've done for the game.
They appreciate your efforts. Hell, like, the effort you put into that sounds like some mammoth, like,
it is. It was a monumental amount of work,
and it feels like even now it feels like you're burnt out from that. Like, you don't strike the person you're telling me that you were. You don't strike me as that person who wants to organize lots of different people and get all these, like, you like things to do. You like things to happen when you want them to happen, and organizing people seems like one of the last things that you'd.
Yeah, but that's different. That's different though as well, right? I was a sophomore in college with nothing but time realistically on my hands. I mean, I had a lot more time than I have right now, right? Yeah. It's a lot different being a professional with a job that you work 40 hours a week and other commitments that you have to do, right? Essentially, life happened. But
yeah, I see.
Back at that time, in 2010, I had nothing but time, and kind of like I am now, I'm a very persistent person, and when I get something set in my mind, I don't tend to give up on it until either I've been completely axed, like told, get away from me, like this is never happening. We're going to call the cops if you message us one more time. Or
is that what Microsoft did? They called the cops on you?
Well, no, so they one-upped me. In fact, after I had been persistently bugging them so much, it was around that time where eventually one of those community moderators messaged me back and said, this is not something we're able to do at this point, but we have this new game in the works. Would you be interested in, taking your balance efforts or your balance abilities and coming and helping us balance this new game?
Wow.
And that was the end. That was the transition between. I basically said, yeah, I'd love to do that. I was almost failing out of school at that point. I said, you know what, I need to take a year off anyways, and I kind of just left FanPatch 1.2 and went and started doing Age of Empires Online.
And rightfully so.
Which at that point no one knew what it was, right?
And you couldn't talk about it, I presume.
Yeah, I mean that was when it was pre-alpha. Very, very early on in development.
But that actually sounds like when you got that message from them, I can imagine you being very, very shocked, surprised even. I mean, that's actually huge. A job at Microsoft. Like, for anyone that doesn't understand how monumental that is, that's gonna get you places in the future. At the time, I imagine you were very, very young, right?
Yeah, I was 20 years old, 19 years old.
So if you can say, "Oh, I've worked at Microsoft." Developing, as a what was your job title? I imagine it was something fancy.
It was something like support engineer or something engineer. What was? Yeah, something like software balance engineer or something like that. Software test engineer.
All right, Mr. Engineer.
Something like that. It had the word engineer in it, right? And it made it sound good. I could pull up an old copy of my resume or something and find it, but. It had the word engineer in it. It looked pretty official, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so.
I can imagine that job being very, very fun and very, very satisfying, given what you did on Age of Empires 3, and you clearly very passionate about that game. And it probably makes sense now to everybody listening why this very first episode of this podcast opened with some sort of random discussion on Age of Empires Online. I mean, it was something in the news that was, I guess, relevant and new, but really, this podcast, what I wanted to talk about was how Zuta and I, how each of us got into Age of Empires 3, what it means to us as a game, why we played it, why we did, and committed the amount of time that we did. Zuta's probably spent thousands of hours if you count all the hours on FanPatch, and certainly the streams as well. And
I can only you know how there's the ticker in Steam that shows you how many hours you've played a game. If that existed since 2005 and it counted the boxed hours, I think I would be in awe at what that number is right now.
Yeah, I think I would be too. Not as high as yours because you've been around for longer than I have, but mine would be huge. I used to play the game every single day. I would sign in after school, and sometimes I wouldn't go to bed until extremely late, and on the weekends I'd play it. And if I was able to stream back when I was playing it, and back when I created my original YouTube channel, if I could have streamed the game back then, I'm sure I would have been one of the most active streamers there was. Put it that way.
Yeah. I didn't have the PC to stream, and I mean, in 2005, 2007, 2006...
This was pre-YouTube, 2005.
Yeah. I mean, it's streaming wasn't a big thing, right? Esports as a thing wasn't a big thing, so the best we had were, some really crappy 480p YouTube videos, and that's about it.
I know that the original way to effectively stream your game was actually to use the in-game, record your game, right? You use the recorded game feature, and then you record voice commentary with it, and then you upload the recorded game with a sound file, and people listen to them in sync. And that used to be the way you do that for the original Age of Empires. And
that's not even the way I used to do it. The way I used to do it is I would record the game with Fraps or something like that, and then. Yeah, and then I would watch it in Media Player with the sound recorder going. Fraps myself talking about it without any sound. That's how I originally did it.
Oh my god!
So I fraps the gameplay, and then I wasn't good enough to be talking while I was doing it and have it be actually interesting, right? And so I would rewatch the game in Windows Media Player while frapsing myself, now being able to talk about the game. So that's how I think that original YouTube video that I have posted on my channel.
There is one from 8 years ago.
Yes, I think that's how that video was created.
The Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
But that's and you uploaded it in 3 parts as well. But that was because at the time YouTube,
you could only do it.
Yeah,
10 minutes.
I think it was 10-minute sections or 15, something like that. That was They released longer videos that was a feature that came, like, maybe you're younger than I am. I imagine everyone my age and above would remember this, but if you are younger than me, and I'm 22, then, yeah, YouTube used to be, everything was in 3 parts or more, like all of the old YouTube videos. That's why it's part 1, part 2, part 3, because the maximum length was 10 or 15 minutes, I don't remember which, but yeah, those were the days. And I believe, like, that 8 years ago, like, I think that's when YouTube kind of started, so you must have posted those videos, like, around the time that YouTube kind of began, or at least the YouTube era.
It was like the new hot thing, right? Yeah. When I was posting those videos, it was a very, very, very long time ago, and within a year or so of when YouTube started.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting actually that for you back then, Zuta, YouTube was this is new hot thing, right? But actually, YouTube I think is going to be around forever, and I find that really odd to think that even 500 years time that your YouTube video will
will hopefully still be there. I just, maybe like my grandkids can watch it.
Yeah, or maybe this will be like the way the future like works out how the past, like I know in my degree is linguistics, and knowing how people spoke 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago would actually be very useful in that field of study. Well, 500 years from now, maybe linguistics will be out of...
Dear God, I hope they don't stumble across my video.
What if your video becomes some sort of case study for a bunch of students?
Just this. Yeah. Oh, man. Let us observe as this guy makes a fool of himself.
I'll put the video in the description or the show notes. You can have links and stuff to anything that we might be talking about if you want to take a look. But that's how you got your job at Microsoft then. Yep. And I think it's pretty interesting. Is there anything before that, though? Is there anything else to say? I mean, I remember on Smackdown, which we'll talk about later as well, Smackdown, you got a game out of a box of cornflakes.
Yeah. I've told the cereal story before on SmackDown. I mean, essentially, the way that video games used to be distributed back in the year 2000 and before, a great way to get a kid to play your game was to put it in a box of cornflakes and just have have it be the prize in a box of cereal. And believe it or not, that's how Age of Empires 1 started. That was the original distribution method for Age of Empires 1, was wrapped up in a little paper flap sitting in the bottom of your cornflakes
box. Was it your regular breakfast cereal, or was it just luck that your parents bought that particular box of cereal?
No, it was the regular one. But so we had lots of cereal as kids, right? And oftentimes you do pick the cereal based on the prize in the box. That's the way they did it, right? They wouldn't put a video game in a box of cereal if they didn't think that there was a chance that the kids would point at that one and say, "Mom, I want that one," right? So
yeah, it makes me wonder why they don't do it anymore. And I think the answer is because the expectation of video games has gone up a lot. And back in the day, you could get away with putting, I don't know, a piece of software that you had 3 guys develop for 6 weeks or whatever it was. I don't think Age of Empires 1 took that long. It probably took much longer with much more people. But you see what I'm saying.
Quick tangent, by the way. Speaking of cornflakes cereal games, there was also on the box of Chex, maybe you'll remember this, there was a game called Chex Quest.
I've not heard of Chex Quest,
okay.
But that may be the cultural barrier between us as opposed to the age barrier.
You know what the game Doom is, right? Everyone's heard of Doom.
Everyone's heard of Doom, yes.
Chex Quest is a Doom clone. It plays the exact same, except your guy is a Chex, like he's the cereal Chex, and he's like wearing like a suit, and he's like a piece of cereal, and he's got a Cheerio gun.
Not heard of this, yes. And it's definitely not a cultural barrier then. This is a...
It was.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things I ever pulled out of a cereal box. Aside from Age of Empires 1, Chex Quest was like the next best thing that I ever pulled out.
I thought you were telling me about some sort of like, by check, I thought you meant like you check the boxes and it was like a little spaghetti drawing puzzle that you had to solve on the back of a cereal box. I thought
it was like a Doom clone.
No, it was a piece of software.
Yeah, it was another game, right? Like
yeah. The best thing I got out of a cereal box was the planets or some documentary about what we knew about our solar system. It was this 3-hour video about Pluto, Jupiter, and just facts, and it fascinated me. And I think that that particular DVD that I got out of the cereal box. Actually, maybe it wasn't even out of the cereal box. I think it was either out of a cereal box or it was that my grandmother got it out of a newspaper and gave it to me, and she thought I'd find it interesting. But I think that's what set me off down the road to be super fascinated by space and all that comes with that. And, I've watched hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos about space, and I just find it very, very interesting. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, cereal boxes. That's not how I happened to come across Age of Empires 1. My story is a bit different.
Yeah, how did you get into Age then?
Alright, so the first time I remember playing Age of Empires 1 was when I was very, very young. So obviously I am younger than you by
4 years by the sounds of it if you're 22.
By 4 years. Like if you were 15 playing Age of Empires 3 in 2005, then I was 11 and far too young to play a game competitively or go off on a quest to make a fan patch, right? So I missed out there, I think, on the golden age by just my age. And I feel like I missed out partly because of that, but also partly because I did join late. Which I'll say why. I joined when everything was sort of settling down. And I wonder where I would be if I was there from the beginning as well. I think that's interesting to think about. But Age of Empires 1... I was around my friend's house. I was being babysat. My mum was at work. It was the summer holidays. And my mum's friend, I don't know, she had like a day off. And when my mum would also look after her child as well. So we'd often spend a lot of time together, either at his mum's house or at my mum's house. And he had this game, Age of Empires 1, and he was playing it. And I think it was like Deathmatch he was playing because, I don't know, maybe he didn't want to start with the collecting all the resources. And I was like, oh, what is this? And he's like, oh, I have to gather wood, and I make troops, and I fight people, and there was like a black map, and I thought, oh, this looks really cool. And the game just kept telling him, you need to build more houses, you need to build more houses. So all he would do is build houses everywhere. And I was like, dude, why don't you just wait until it tells you that you need more houses? And I don't know when I need more houses. We were pretty stupid. But yeah. And I eventually got Age of Empires 1 for I don't know what it was. It was either Christmas or a birthday. It was like when a reason for me to ask for that game, and I got it then, and we also like had a family computer that I installed it on, and that actually, I think, in part, Age of Empires 1 and RuneScape are the games responsible for taking over my life and turning me... Basically, I call them the gateway drugs into the world of gaming.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that is the case. If it wasn't for those two games, I'd probably not be as enthusiastic about video games. You get those people that just don't have interest in them, and I might have turned out to be a person like that playing football with my mates, and I definitely stopped doing that as much when I was playing Age of Empires when I got a hold of that game. And then, I heard there was an Age of Empires 2 when I went to a game store. We actually just have a store called Game in the UK, which... I went in there and I found Age of Empires 2, and I remember getting that at some point as well, and I'd be playing that on my dad's ancient laptop, back when 2 gigabytes of hard drive space was like, oh that's a load.
The next big thing.
But now I have 2 gigabytes. In fact, I have 64 gigabytes in my phone, and something
exactly.
That's significantly smaller, by several orders of magnitude.
If someone told you were only going to get 2 gigs on a computer now, you'd laugh at them.
Yeah, you'd be like, what?
Just go home, you're drunk.
2 terabytes is the standard now, and even that's starting to... back then, what we have now just doesn't seem fathomable, and you think how far computers have come. It's interesting to think how much further they can come. But that's not what we're here to discuss. So yeah, I played Age of Empires 2, and I remember both of these games giving me this sense of, awe and amazement when I first started playing them, and I thought the campaigns were so in depth, and when I go back to them they're really not. But I have this huge sense of nostalgia and respect for the games, and then Age of Mythology, that was really where everything kicked off. I got Age of Mythology, and that was the game that I thought was the best. That was the first game that I started to play competitively, and it was probably because I was now old enough. The thing that stopped me from playing Age of Empires 1 and 2 competitively is that we didn't have an internet connection.
That could support online play, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the same for me, stuck on dial-up. You used to play on something called The Zone, right? And I remember trying to connect once, and it was maybe I didn't even have our internet password. Like, I think maybe my parents didn't even like allow me to like go on the internet without asking them, and so I just didn't even bother. I just always played it offline as a result. I always remember seeing that like the zone like thing, and knowing that it was a thing that you could do, but never really caring about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for me. We had a connection that was dial-up that I was allowed to use, and it was like, it wasn't a pay-as-you-go one, it was like a fixed rate, like a fixed monthly rate or something, but it did, like, I used to play RuneScape on that a lot, and during the evenings no one could phone our house because dial-up actually stops the telephone from
It
working.
legitimately made it, you had to make a decision about whether or not you were going to use the internet or use the telephone.
Yep, because one didn't work with the other.
That's right.
You literally couldn't run the other. It just wouldn't work. Like,
Man.
the computer would be on the phone.
Unbelievable where we've come.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Yep. I had completely forgotten about dial-up internet. And the fact that you had to make that's probably why I wasn't allowed to play online, realistically, because like my mom was waiting for like someone to call. Like she didn't want us to block up the phone line for 6 hours a night or whatever, right? And so that's probably why I didn't play it online.
That's exactly why I didn't play, come to think of it all. But Age of Mythology was where I started playing online, and when I started playing online, I think the community for that game was starting to get smaller, because this would have been 2005 to 2007.
Yeah.
I would play that online. I wasn't very good at it, and I mostly spent my time playing free-for-alls and team games with terrible opponents because I was also very bad at the game.
They also probably thought, hey, this guy sucks. I have terrible... this guy, he's a terrible opponent.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun back then, and remember, I was younger. So how did I get into Age of Empires 3? That's the interesting thing, right? And that came about in high school / what we call sixth form, so I guess we should briefly cover the differences between US and British.
Yeah. I don't even know what that is. It sounds like a disease or something. Sick form.
Six, like number six.
Oh, okay.
Six.
Well, that sounds less like a disease. Sounds like a number, in fact.
Okay, so I think, I don't even know myself, but back a long time ago in Britain, you'd have first form, second form, third form, and this would be kind of similar, I guess, to the grades system you have, like as you go up a grade every year. In Britain, we have that too, except it's called year 1, year 2, year 3, etc. But when you get to year 11, that's your final year. There are no more years after that. You complete what is called your GCSEs, your General Certificate of Education. I believe in the States you get like one piece of paper saying I passed high school, but in Britain you get lots of pieces of paper saying I passed maths, I passed English, I passed science. And generally people, when you want to get employed, you need 5 GCSEs minimum, otherwise they'll laugh at you and tell you to go away.
Right.
So getting a job was you'd need 5 of those, all the teachers would say. I think it was partly because the school would kind of get in trouble if you didn't get 5 of them. English and maths would always be a requirement as well. But after that, you then can leave school legally and get a job, or you can continue what is sixth form, which is effectively a year 12 and 13, where you do A-levels, which are Advanced Certificate of Education or something like that. You usually pick 4 and then drop 1 in your second year. So you do like half an A-level and then 3 full A-levels. But this was around that time when I was doing my A-levels. And universities in the UK, you need A-levels to get in. Like, they don't look at your GCSEs. Well, they do, but they look at your A-levels. That's really it. So this is the kind of era of education I'm in. So I guess it's kind of high school if you're in the US. That's kind of where this was.
It's like your senior year of high school. It's like the end of high school.
All right, there's Zuta translating for me. So that's what this is. I'm getting qualifications for uni. But I'd still go to the same school. Like, you could go to, in Britain, you can, like, once you finish school, you then go to college, which is not university. So you go, you do school, college, and then university. And I know in the States, college and university mean the same thing, but they do not mean the same thing in Britain. And you can go to a college to do your A-levels, but I stayed at my school and did my A-levels at the school. And you can do that too, and that's perfectly normal. So my friend was the year below me in year 11, so he was still doing, I was year 12, which is effectively my first year of the A-levels, and he was doing his final year of his GCSEs. And basically, he was just a guy I knew from another friend. But I think what happened, actually, was that I used to get a bus to school, but then they changed my bus route, so I had to get a different bus. So I got on this new bus, And then, well, the friend of a friend happened to sit next to him, and I knew that he played Age of Empires from my friend telling me that he played Age of Empires, because he also knew that I played Age of Empires. And I mentioned it to him, and we started talking about it. We really hit off on that topic, because it was, I guess, common ground. And actually, this person, his ESO account was Kensington Bear.
Rings no bells.
No bell. No, it probably doesn't ring any bells.
As the certified Age of Empires 3 historian, that name means nothing to me.
It doesn't ring bells to you. This is not. So you're interested in the high histories, right? I'm telling you all about the folklore that no one really.
Yeah, that's right.
You did all the important stuff. I'm just here to tell you about
the personal story, which is just as interesting.
He was Kensington Bear, and if there is anybody in the chat that remembers that name, I'd be very interested to see that comment. Him and I, we'd talk on the bus. Like, every morning on the bus, we would talk about Age of Empires. And that was a routine thing. Like, I told him, no, I don't think so, dude. I think Age of Mythology is got much more strategy in it. I think that game is superior. I basically told him I didn't think Age of Empires 3 had as much strategy in it. I thought Age of Mythology was the height of strategic diversity and the pinnacle of RTS games. That was my opinion at the time.
Right.
But he convinced me to play Age of Empires 3 with him, and I did. And I was wrong. I was very wrong. Age of Empires 3, sorry to anyone who does play Age of Mythology or has... I think Age of Empires 3 just has significantly more diversity in the strategy department, with just what I consider to be like so many different things you could do. And I think that's partly because of the home city mechanic that made the game significantly less linear. I feel like Age of Empires 2 suffers from that a lot. And I don't know about StarCraft, but because I've not really ever played it properly. But I feel like, there's so many build orders you can do, and they're all very linear because you don't have those extra, like, massive boosts of resources out of nowhere that, like, can really fuel a certain kind of strategy. I'm not really certain if that's true, but that's how I thought Age of Empires 3 this home city mechanic was actually, like...
It's something different, something fresh, right?
I thought that was what every RTS needed. And the one thing I missed from Age of Mythology was god powers, and I'd like to have seen those in Age of Empires 3, and you kind of do have them, really, like in the form of the Portuguese spyglass.
Yeah.
It's not really a god power, but they do touch on it, kind of, and I think they wanted god powers in this strategy book that I bought that turned out to be absolutely awful. It was the worst strategy, but they said, like, the best booming civilization in the game was Ottoman. Yeah, and one of their listed strategies was rush up to the fortress age,
drop 3 TCs,
and build 3 towns.
It just watches your villagers come out ungodly slow.
And, like, I kind of get why they'd write that, because... Alright, you get them for free, but...
Did they not, see Brits and see every time you make a house, which is a requirement to play the game, you get a free villager?
I'm actually very tempted to find the book and quote it. I think we'll do that next time, actually. I might quote a couple of things from this strategy guide. My friend, him and I, he got me to play the game, and I did, and I thought it was excellent. We played countless 2v2s together, and we played, like, that was what we did. I'd play Spanish, it was my favourite civilization, and he would tend to play Dutch, and we'd go for the skirmisher hussar combo was usually our opening.
Well, to be fair, you were playing vanilla, though, right? Which, like...
Yeah, we did play vanilla, and then we did move. We actually played a lot of War Chiefs as well for some reason, and then we did move to TAD, and we found that Skirmisher Hussar wasn't very effective.
Yeah, not in TAD. But certainly in, like, vanilla and TWC, like, I can see Spain-Dutch being really strong.
Yeah, I remember some of our Deccan strategies were pretty cool as well. I think I'd let him gather up all my wood crates, and he would build a lot of banks out of them. And I would send something like capitalism plus the villager shipments. This was when I was first getting into the game, and I knew nothing about the community.
PR, like, you guys are like PR 7 and 8, just like commanding the battlefield at that point, right?
I think we were like master sergeants, actually, sort of like second lieutenant at the time, and I think the ranking system back then was different because there were more players. And, the boundaries between skill was...
significantly more.
But anyway, that's what we did. And then he started playing a lot of 1v1, and because he just liked playing the game. And because I played the game, I think he liked playing it. He liked being better than me, though he wasn't. We'd play Treaty, and I would always win, right? We'd always have, like, a no-rush agreement, and I would win the game, because I had the concept down. I had that down. Like, I understood, like... like, I just understood macroing the villagers and getting that all out and doing it properly and sending the right cards in the right order and all of these things. But then when we played Rush, he tended to always be better than me, which was just the way of things. And he played a lot of 1v1, and we always, I think our understanding of 1v1 was who could rush the fastest, who could optimize their rush for the fastest rush. And that's not really how 1v1 works at a high level, but we thought that was, and we just thought the faster you rush, like, the more likely you were to win. And he found this Aztec Puma thing, which just absolutely shat on everything I tried to do.
Oh man, it's so funny you say that, right? Because I'm gonna stop your story with your friend for a moment to tell you about my friend,
Okay.
whom I was also in the PR like 17 to 18 range, and we had also discovered that rushing was the big hot thing in TWC. I played Ottoman because, of course, like every PR20 knows that shipping 5 gens and building 5 gens because you age up the fastest, like clearly you just have the best rush. He did the same thing. He played Aztec, and we would all in rush. We would literally make 20 Janissaries and like 15 Pumas with like a mace shipment or something, and right click on TCs and pray that we won. And
Yep.
there were so many games that we played like that. It was just a coin flip. Like your TC goes down, we kill all your villagers. There was like no attempt to like get better at the game or like learn how this game actually worked. There was a stretch of time there for 4 months. All we cared about was taking that coin flip, sieging TCs, and praying that we won enough games to go up in PR. And of course we didn't, because when you win 50% of your games, like, you stay locked in at PR 17 for a very long time.
Yeah, you plateau. Oh, those were the days. Yeah. That's where 1v1 started for me. That's where, like, competitive Age of Empires started for me. Yeah, just with this rush stuff and who could make the fastest rush. And I remember, I think it was Yumiyu back in the day, and Lancelot 712. Is that a name in the history books?
Yes, that is a name in the history books. The name registers with the historian.
Yeah, it does for me too. And on vanilla, they, because my favorite civilization was Spain.
Yeah.
Because I think my thing with them was, I'd always play them with my friend, and he was like, dude, stop playing Spain, it's the worst civ. And we thought it genuinely was the worst civ. And you can see why two people who
are uninformed,
who literally thought the game was about who could make the fastest rush, that, of course you'd think Spain was the worst civ. It had no defense potential. Basically, I liked it because it was this underdog civ, and I wanted to make it work, and I've always been that way. And then I was playing vanilla, and I played vanilla for a very, very long time. And these two people, Yumiu and Lancelot, they showed me the fast fortress with Spain, right?
Yep.
And this absolutely revolutionized the way I thought about the game.
Wait, you mean there's more than just right-clicking TCs?
Yeah. So I thought 1v1 was just about rushing, and team games were a bit different. I understood that in team games, the game could go past the colonial age. Like, we understood that. But in 1v1, no. Until I learned the fast fortress, right?
Yeah.
So I practiced this fast fortress. I believe the version I learned was the original one I would always try to do was, do everything you'd normally do, get a trading post, or no, not even do that. What you'd do is just get the food and coin with your 700 coin shipment, hit up to the next stage, and then I put every single villager on coin, and then try and ship Highlanders as my very first card.
Okay.
So, and if that didn't work, then obviously I'd try and send 5 Lancers. And like, against my friend, I knew he'd rush me, so I got my food ready whilst I was aging up for the War Dogs. Got my Minutemen ready, right? Got my, I knew what shipment I needed to send. 5 Lancers. He attacked my base, okay, with his rush.
Yep.
And then the War Dogs, the Minutemen, the Town Centre Fire, the Lancers, and the 4 Cavalry I got from aging up, they all fell on him at the same time. And I obliterated his rush.
And you realized, holy shit, I can hold literally anything with this build.
Yep. I was like... This episode of the Zuterjection podcast is also, well, not sponsored by a company per se, though hopefully more of those in the future. Instead, today I want to talk about a guy that really helped me out. Recently, I had to spend a lot of money fixing my PC. it just completely went bust. I ended up thinking I'd have to buy a new one, so I took my broken PC into a local repair shop, not a big franchise or anything like that, just a local business, and the guy that worked there was really good. And instead of buying a new PC, he helped me find out which components were broken, and even ordered in parts they didn't have so that they could test out what wasn't working. And a lot of shops won't do that, actually, especially if it's a processor that's gone bust, and that is exactly what had happened. The most expensive component in my PC died. Instead of buying a new PC, I ended up recycling a lot of the components from the old one into the new one that he built for me. I can't build computers, as I really have no idea how. And whilst it might sound like he was just doing his job, he really did save me a lot of money, discounting things where he could, using stuff in their workshop instead of charging me for new things, like fans and operating systems. Yeah. I wasn't able to recover anything from my old PC. Even the BIOS was corrupt and my copy of Windows is gone. So he got a copy of Windows 7 off an old laptop that was lying around that just couldn't be used anymore, it was broken, and put that on my PC and upgraded it to Windows 10 for me. He saved me a lot of money and gave me a lot of advice, and I'm really, really grateful. Now, this guy runs a YouTube channel, which he posts videos on regularly, and I'm kind of hoping I can get you guys to make his day, Obviously, he's an expert on computers and software and stuff like that, and I was looking through his channel, and he has a video about Windows 10 and how it wasn't very good at all for gaming when it first came out. I think things are a lot better now, but that kind of information would have been really useful to know back when it was relevant, and you never know when something new like that is going to pop up, so I decided to subscribe. Obviously, I like the guy, but I thought it'd be really useful to be subscribed to someone like that, who I could ask questions to in the comments if I needed to. And I'm sure he'd answer them. It's not a big channel yet that he's running. The guy's main content that he puts out regularly is videos of him testing new top-end hardware, really expensive stuff. And I'm hoping, even if you guys aren't that interested, I'd really appreciate it if you could head on over to his most recent video and say, Interjection sent me. I'd really like that, and I think he would too. There's a link to his channel in the show notes below. Thanks, guys. So, that friend of mine, I showed him the Spanish Fast Fortress afterwards, and we did that a lot. We played a lot of mirror matchups, which is probably why I'm so knowledgeable about Spain mirrors. But he would come round with his laptop, and then when he got a desktop PC on the weekends, he would lug his PC. He would take it maybe, I don't know how long, not that far, but far enough to be a nuisance, and he'd set up his PC in my room, and he'd basically have dinner at mine, and then he'd live at mine at the weekends, and we would play a mixture of team games, 1v1s, and treaty, and that's all we did at my house for Age of Empires 3. And if I, back in the day, if I'd streamed this, maybe I would have gotten better quicker, because, but this is the learning curve I had. It was with this guy, and yeah, he was in the room at the time when I beat him with this. He saw me hit up to the Fortress Age, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And then, boom, crushed him.
The rest is history. He never rushed you ever again.
Yeah, well, it changed the way we thought about the game.
Yeah, you had your own little meta game going on.
I think that was it. And again, we were playing against people our level who also thought that rushing was the thing to do.
Superior, I think even to this day on vanilla, under PR20, most people still think Ottoman and just all-inning with Jan Avis is better.
That's where we started to play the game more and have a higher understanding, and this is where I began a YouTube channel. Well, actually, he kind of stopped playing the game, and I think he started playing a lot of League of Legends, and I think that's the fate a lot of people did kind of...
Yeah.
I say fate, but I guess being an Age of Empires player, I would consider that a fate, because that seems like the end of what I loved so much. One of my friends who also loved it so much going away from it. And that seemed like a bad thing to me, which was why I picked the word fate, I think.
Well, it was that brutal year of 2011, right? So that's when the Age of Empires Online beta started, and that's when League of Legends came out with their first season of competitive ranked play, and that's when StarCraft 2 came out as well, was released. It was actually a super detrimental year to Age of Empires 3 as a whole.
Yeah, but... Yeah, my friend went away from the game, and what I did is, I think I went away too, but I've always done this. I've had this switch. I've always switched between RuneScape and Age of Empires. I've always done that, no matter which Age of Empires game it was, whichever one I'd happen to be liking. It used to be Mythology, it's now Age of Empires 3. I'd play RuneScape a lot, and that was also one of the games that I go very, very far back with. I have similar stories to tell about RuneScape. like I do with Age of Empires. But obviously, this is not the time or place to share those. Eventually I came back to Age of Empires 3 and started playing it again. And I joined a clan. It was called Nation of Warriors. Does that register in the history books?
Who is the clan leader? It doesn't immediately. See, the thing is, you were also like a vanilla player for the longest of times, and so
Yeah.
I know the name Lancelot 712, but I also know him as a high-level vanilla player who oftentimes kind of gets swept to the side because he played vanilla, right? So, I don't know a lot of the vanilla history because at that point I was just so ingrained with TAD.
Actually, it was a TAD clan.
Okay.
But and the guy's name was Dave's Beck.
Doesn't register. Sorry, Dave.
I find that very, very amusing because he thinks, probably to this day, that is the most famous clan in Age of Empires 3 history.
So, Squiz is the clan, right? Squiz or Hope.
Yeah, absolutely. That or Hope. But our arch... Well, I say our as if I'm still part of it, but our arch nemesis of a clan that we hated. Actually, I'm not even kidding, got to the point where we would be DDoSing their TeamSpeak server and they would be DDoSing ours and trying to get our password and get on our server, and it was, I don't know what this was.
Hardcore stuff.
Yeah. And do you know what clan that was, Zuta, that we didn't like? It was actually the PK clan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we hated them. We really did. I don't know what it was. It was this weird time where, you seem to be doing productive things like making a fan patch and creating a future for the game.
And you're DDoSing someone's TeamSpeak.
And I'm not kidding, right? Ryan Chapley, Ryzon.
Yeah.
He must have received so many emails from Dave's Back about getting people just, and I shit you not, right? We there was this guy in the PK clan that we didn't like, and Dave actually photoshopped a fake abusive message,
incriminating evidence.
Yeah, and sent it to Ryzon, and the guy received a week ban. I've never said it before, right? I'm sure it's long enough now that I'm not going to get banned for that.
No.
Yeah, and Ryzon certainly doesn't. He doesn't work. But everyone knows who Ryzon is. But I actually genuinely think 90% of his inbox was us, and that's not. And I know how large those inboxes can be, right? I'm not even kidding. The amount of our clan leader was the kind of guy that if he didn't like someone, he would say to everybody in the clan, "Oh, by the way, could you send an email saying this to Ryzon?" And he would have 15 people do that.
Oh man, that's funny.
So he was a very odd guy, I like to say. Well, now that I look back on it, I don't think the guy was odd. I just think we were all very immature.
You were probably younger, right? You were still in the phase that I was in when I was that age, where it's just you're in a different mindset, right? There's a huge difference between someone who's 15 and someone who's 20, and although it seems like it's just 5 short years, your maturity level is completely different between those ages, right? And everywhere in between, it's just a spectrum in between that. So
yeah, this clan, I spent a lot of time with this online group of friends who kept me interested, and I'd sign on every day, and they re-sparked this interest for Age of Empires with me. We'd play 2v2s, we'd play free-for-alls, we'd play 3v3s, we'd play all sorts. We'd just play Age of Empires on a TeamSpeak, and it became more than that. There was a lobby, and you just chill out in the lobby and just talk to people and not have to play Age of Empires, and that was a really nice experience. And then when I turned 18, I went down to visit a bunch of the clan members. We had a friend from Australia come down, and he was just coming to Australia as a trip anyway, and he ended up coming to see us because why not? If you're in the UK, makes sense. Yeah. So we went down to Sheffield, and we had a good time. There was actually a lot of fun being around all these people that I was good friends with. To this day, my mum doesn't really understand that she's like, oh, they're not real friends. You can't have relationships with, or not relationship.
Yeah, people online. Yeah.
Yeah, you just she doesn't get it. She doesn't I tell her I am hanging out with people, I am socializing, No, that just doesn't, like, that's, apparently she doesn't see it as the same thing. And I guess there are subtle differences, but for me, there's very little difference, and it's almost the same.
It's a difference of, like, perception of technology and stuff as well, right? I mean, it's just the different ages and where we've come from, the technology that we've grown up with. It's just, like, something that's completely foreign to them, and they don't know, like, they don't get that, like, the tools that you have available to on a computer can realistically, like, lead you to, like, lifelong friendships. Like, it's absolutely true.
And I'm sure everyone's gone through this. Like, maybe you spend a whole day or a whole week working on a project that you left to the last minute, and you don't get to speak to very many people because you're so busy trying to fix it. You kind of feel lonely. But speaking to people online, I don't think she got it. Like, you could get your human interaction quota in for the day from
a computer.
Yeah, she didn't think it was real, but I think it was. So there's that. And I ended up being the best player in the clan. These people...
It's always good to be king of the castle, right?
Imagine, you know, I wasn't a good player, right? Not by today's standards. And but I was the best player in the clan, and they were like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And my Spanish Fast Fortress was like some crazy...
legendary, something of myth.
But like none of them possessed the skills to pull off the timings necessary to get it right?
Yeah.
Like they found it rather difficult to do that, and timing your Minutemen with your Lancer shipment was, you know, something that they found, I don't know. And the point is I made videos about it just to show them this is what I'm doing, or I'm going to play this. And I posted the video on RTS Sanctuary at the same time because I thought, well, there's no reason not to. And it picked up like 100 views within maybe 3 or 4 hours. And I was like, oh, that's not bad. It actually picked up quite a lot of views, and I think to this day it is the most viewed video on my old channel. And that's interesting because it was just me playing French. I think I did a pure Hussar rush or something ridiculous that was, I don't know.
Interesting.
But that's where the Interjection sort of YouTube channel started.
Sure.
But it wasn't on Interjection, it was on the Nation of Warriors YouTube channel, which was our clan YouTube channel where we would upload videos of, you know, but really it was just me. There was no one else uploading to it.
Sure.
Aside from Dave, who did one prank video, like where he phoned up a Sainsbury's, which is a food chain in the UK, and told the person on the other end of the phone that he had no toilet paper in the bathroom. So he had some poor lady come to the male bathroom and deliver toilet paper to a cubicle that no one was in. And obviously he knew the layout of the food store quite well, so he was able to tell him exactly which cubicle he wasn't in. And he had like a soundboard that made really, really egregious farting noises. So he was over the phone like, I really need some toilet paper, something like that. The video, I'm not necessarily sure if it's on there. I think I ended up deleting it from the channel, and I'll get to that later. It was amusing, and I certainly don't have the balls to do anything like that. But it wasn't Age of Empires related, but that was his only claim to anything on the channel, right? And the reason that channel grew to 997 subscribers, it never got to 1,000, and it still isn't at 1,000, and it never will get to 1,000, I imagine.
Unless 3 people hear this and they're like, you know what?
Well, it's at 930 now or something like that. I think a lot of people unsubscribed when I made the transition to my Interjection channel.
I see.
Yeah, but I was the reason that channel got anywhere, and over time I took it more seriously and tried different strategies out with different civs. And it's a very freelance thing. I mean, there was obviously this established metagame that all the high-level players knew about, including you and many others, and there was this fan patch that I was completely... I knew what CRC mismatch was, but I didn't know what caused it.
Right.
But now
you know.
Put 2 and 2 together. Like, whilst you were busy doing productive stuff and with your established metagame, I was pioneering the way for... I was like... I thought I was the like making Age of Empires 3.
Making these videos, yeah.
Obviously that wasn't the case, but I learned this eventually, and I got a lot of help from higher level players. But actually the person of note that needs to have a mention here is absolutely Azemk, and is by far my closest and longest friend on ESO. Which is saying something, because Azem's very protective and doesn't tell you his name or where he's from or anything like that. So I know almost nothing about Azemk except his age, and actually I do know quite well. I know a lot about Azemk, but the point is he was the guy who told me I liked the video, this was wrong, this was good. Eventually that led, with his help, to me watching. Like, something people I think is interesting about Aze is the amount of OBS games he did. He streams a lot now, but back in the day he used to host, what he would do was just sign on to vanilla, host an OBS game with 6 players, get an opponent and 4 viewers, and then just start.
Right.
And he would just do that. That was all he did. That was the only thing he did. And I just joined in and watched too, and I, like all the high-level players, like, bitch into each other about, oh, how did he miss that villager, and, oh, that fucking micro was terrible. You pick up on that, and you get slightly better at the game. And I just liked watching A's do funny things, like ship Swiss pikemen and destroy people's houses whilst they were attacking his base. Yep. And, I think that's where it came from. And eventually it led to me watching A's and Musket Jr. play. Or no, it wasn't even Musket Jr., it was some other guy, but it was like, I watched 2 players play, and I tried to commentate it in a professional-sounding way. Mm-hmm. And what inspired me to do that was the videos by 36 Drew. He sort of pioneered the way, and
he was the original like content maker. Drew was a member of a clan called N3O. They were a very large, big community, open, like friendly clan. You could join with like any PR. They had a website. They had their own very active board. They were just like led by a leader who was like just a super nice guy. They had just really good like chemistry amongst them. They were all friends. They were very friendly. And Drew was one of the better, probably the best player in that clan. He was like PR 36, 37, maybe got up to Brigadier at some point. But he just wanted to help them improve. And so I think his first videos were similar like to you, just him making videos for his clanmates of like, hey, here's me playing against another like good PR 35 player, and then just doing a voiceover of like what his thought process was.
36 Drew coming to you, and 3O Clan representing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Today we have the Ottomans. Oh, those videos were the best.
Yeah, and he just he was just trying to help the people in his clan out, right? And it just caught on. He was good. He was charismatic with the way he presented his content, and at the end of the day, like, people started watching it, liked to watch it, because he was a decent player. He wasn't the best player, but his gameplay was good enough that, if you're PR 25, watching someone who's PR 35 is certainly going to make you better, especially when they're explaining to you their thought process and why they're doing things and stuff like that. And so he picked up a very large following of people external from his clan as a result of that. And then similarly to me, he was a few years older than I was even. He had some health problems and he stopped playing the game. Real life took over. He had to, I think he's a teacher. And, when you're busy with a schedule like that, you just can't keep up that pace of making videos, one a day or one a week even for that matter, forever. And just kind of faded into the sunset as a result. But when you talk about like original content for Age of Empires 3, that is the first name that comes to mind.
Yep, I agree. And all of those videos used to be on like Mediafire or something like that.
Yeah, Blip TV.
Like before YouTube was even a thing. And the guy who runs the N3O YouTube channel, and if you're not subscribed to that, and I know lots of people aren't, so if you are subscribed to my channel and you've gotten this far and you enjoy my content and Zuta's content, then even though it's several years out of date and the meta is very different, the videos of 36 Drew are... And actually, you're on that channel as well. Yeah. I remember watching a Hope Clan tournament final, and it was Drew going, so I'm casting the second half, and then the other was Zuta back in the day, doing the other half of the commentating.
Yeah, I was in N3O Clan for a little while. Well, I say a little while, it was like probably 2 years.
Yeah.
He was part of what inspired me to get started with my stuff as well, and so when there would be like tournaments and stuff, if it was like a best of 7 finals, like I'd take 4 games and he'd take 3, or we'd just like split the games up, because at that point there was no like live broadcast, right? It was just recorded games, and then they would be kept private until they were posted, on our YouTube channels or whatever. So
and that was how that worked back in the day. But I gotta say, I would watch his videos. This is when I got my first smartphone, actually. So I'd watch them at school in the PC labs. We had YouTube. Well, actually, I think YouTube was blocked, but it was funny because you could just go to Google Translate and put YouTube into, I don't know, translate it in French, and it would work, and you could search for videos, and it was just silly. But the point is, I would be watching 36 Drew. Also, I'd watch that on my smartphone in bed, and I just remember him really, really blowing my mind about how you could communicate, like how you could like show the game on YouTube. And I had started a YouTube channel at the time, but with my voiceover commentary of my gameplay, but I thought, I want to commentate other people's gameplay. I want to get the good recorded games.
Yeah.
I want to do it myself, and that was really what made me do it. So I mentioned earlier that there was the Nation of Warriors YouTube channel. We had a very abrupt, very not very good ending to the Nation of Warriors clan. It stopped in a rather bad way, and our clan leader, as you can imagine, the kind of guy who gets people banned by creating fake evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of guy. Like the kind of guy, like, when I remember when we went down to Sheffield and we met up, like, he needed to get a taxi somewhere, so he called 2 taxi companies and just got in the one that arrived first. And, like, you know, this kind of guy, like,
A bit manipulative, yeah.
very manipulative. That's exactly it. And he actually is, you know, the one thing in the world that made me think, wow, you can get very far in life with just your voice box. Like, providing you like inclination to use it that way. Like, you know, it is kind of dirty to treat people like that sometimes. And, you know, with the taxi company, for example, and it's not like sometimes you do think like, but yeah, he would be the kind of guy that would hassle the shop assistant to get the price down over the phone, you know, like or phone up a company and say I didn't like my product and get a new one for free. You know, like, you can get so much done with your voice if you just take the time to use it. But the guy, he was kind of controlling and manipulative. Like, it's weird to say because I actually met the guy very recently on a bus, just out of nowhere, and he goes, "Will," and I like look around, I'm like, "Fuck, it's him," because the last time I spoke to that guy was when I stole his YouTube channel and changed the password and ran away with it. That wasn't this channel, that was the old channel, which all of the videos were still my videos, but yeah, I made this channel with my own Google account. And he knew I was going to study in the University of Essex, and he lived in, like, Essex at the time, and he sent me a pitch, like, when I left the clan, and when it ended all abruptly, because he met, like, we had, like, one of the guys who was working on our site, he'd give him unreasonable deadlines to finish, you know, the forums, or get this done, get that done, and just... I don't know. I decided I didn't want this entity in my life anymore, and a lot of people in the clan decided that as well. So there was kind of a mutiny.
I see.
Where we had the server admin powers to ban him from his own clan, which was, looking back on it, the stupidest thing we could have done.
Tell me what he did, because I'm curious now.
Well, I don't know what there is to say, really. He did, like... Okay, so what he did to me was he knew I was going to study in Essex, and he was living there at the time, and, like, it was coincidence that I was going to go and study there anyway, and it was actually a pretty good coincidence because we were going to, you know, meet up a lot, and I'd be closer to him, and that would be kind of cool. But, like, we all fell out, and I ran away with the YouTube channel because I felt like it was my work that had gotten it that far, not anything that he did. I think I deleted his prank video out of rage because I just... like, thought it was ridiculous on my Age of Empires channel, and I changed the password and ran away with it, and everybody else that didn't like him ran away and started a new clan and took half the clan with him and left him on his own, and he wasn't. But what he would do is send me pictures of, oh, look where I am, and he'd send a picture of the entrance to the university, and
super creepy, yeah.
I know you're living here, or something like that, and it was very, very disconcerting.
Yeah.
Right? It was, and I thought the next time I see this guy, he's going to stab me, or he's going to beat me up.
So what happened when you did see him on the bus?
He was incredibly friendly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was just like, oh, hey, Will, how you doing? It's been ages. And I'm like, yeah. You know, and this is...
Remember, we can't hate each
but
other.
we haven't spoken for years. And I actually did just straight up tell him, I thought the next time you see me, you'd beat me up. And some people on the bus looked around, and I don't think they looked around. I think they just overheard and pricked their ears up. And he was like, "What? Why?" And then I think he caught on and went, "Oh no, we would like." He told me all about how immature he thought we all were back then, and I agreed with him.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, so where are you living?" So I made up some place and lied to him about where I lived.
Naturally.
Yeah, but actually he was really nice. I think he was genuinely like, oh, this is, you know, we haven't seen each other for ages, we were immature back then, and I asked him about the clan and some of the names that I remembered, and he was like, yeah, they're still there, we still talk every day. And he was like, oh, hey dude, you should just sign on one day with the old name you used to use, it'll be really funny, and just start talking as if nothing's happened. And I thought that was quite amusing when he said it, so I laughed with him, and we got on like old friends, and it was just like back in the day, like nothing had changed. But I know deep down what kind of a person he is, and I'm not sure if I want to let that back into my life. So I did give him my phone number because it was very awkward if I didn't. But I haven't heard from him since. He just said, "Oh, it was nice to see you again," or something. It was good talking to you, or something like that. That's all he said. And I said, yeah, it was. I genuinely think that. I think it was good. I asked him what the server address was, because, I don't know, I kind of want to catch up with those people. Like, I miss those people too. And I do think maybe I could let this guy back into my life, but obviously I know better now, and I'm older, and I can do it in such a way that would allow me to not be entangled, like I could hang out with him and not be
in the old shenanigans.
Yeah, and maybe we are just older and everything's safe and fine now. But equally, it's something I ought to be wary of, I suppose. But yeah, that's where my Age of Empires story ends up.
For me, especially like if he lives like that close.
Oh, he lives in Australia now. Like the only reason I saw him on the bus was because he moved back for 2 weeks.
I see. And so then how did we get together? How did you and I become an entity? How did we become Zuterjection?
That's a very good question.
Because that's like the next transition, right? We have these two timelines, right? And they're slowly starting to converge, where you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing. And now, like, you're still playing Age 3 and I've moved on to Age Online, and they're kind of these parallel paths, right? And then I stop working for Microsoft. I go back to school, continue my education. I changed majors at that point, and I graduate, and as you are continuing to do your thing, I regain an interest in Age of Empires 3 as the doors are closing on Age of Empires Online, right? So Age of Empires Online becomes stagnant. They announced that they're not going to be doing any more work on it, effectively shutting down the game eventually, etc., etc. And so I come back to playing Age of Empires 3. And when I was playing Age of Empires Online competitively and at a high level, that's when Twitch had begun starting to be a big thing. And, I was in school, still had some time. I was streaming quite frequently. There was this thing called the Community Challenge in Age of Empires Online that Steve would host, one of the moderators.
I remember it.
And I would play in it sometimes, and sometimes I would help him co-cast it. And when Age of Empires Online was kind of wrapping up and coming end of life, I decided that I still really liked that, and I really liked the whole casting and streaming aspect, and that I wanted to do something similar. And so I had the Age of Empire, what I called originally the Age of Empires 3 Community Challenge. It was just a stream consistently on Wednesday when I got home from class. And I would do basically what we do for Smackdown. I would just cast people playing. We didn't have Aze's nice UI or anything like that, but I would just use some of the old Observer maps and cast the gameplay the best I could. And as I graduated and moved out to start my new job, I decided I wanted to continue to do it. It was a nice way for me to continue to play the game, continue to be active in the community. Finally had some money so that I could pay it back a little bit, get some nicer equipment, actually start being a little bit more serious about my streaming. And I realized that streaming by myself was not going to work. I could not sit there for 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon and stream all by myself. Solo casting is just not something that's sustainable. We've both done it before, and we know how taxing it is on the individual streamer to be solo casting for hours on end. Yeah. And I decided I needed someone to help me out, and I wanted someone who was good at covering up the flaws that I had. I was not very good at being energetic and interesting. I was more analytical, and that was really, my strength as a commentator was being the color commentary on the side of someone who had the energy and the charisma to tie everything together and paint a picture with words and what they were doing. And so I came across Interjection's channel, and I thought, hey, this guy is pretty good at what he does, and if I could get him to cast with me, I think he'd bring a lot to Smackdown. And I think after one of those first Smackdowns, I messaged you, I asked you if you wanted to help me do Smackdown, and kind of presented. I guess the rest is almost history from there.
It's interesting to hear that you felt that way, like you were looking for someone to help you out. And I do remember you saying, actually, that you thought I was good at covering what was happening in the moment. And I do think that is my strength when it comes to commentary. I think I'm maybe not so good at the analytics side. That's definitely something you're very good at. But just saying what's happening on screen right now is something I like to do. Yeah, and then I think it just happened, right? We did the very first
The very first one, yeah.
Was it Maito versus Night BR?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Or someone versus Night BR?
I think that's right.
And it turned out to be like a pretty good series until Knight ran out of civs that he could play.
Yeah. and then we just kept iterating on it, right? I mean, I remember the first time thinking, like, was this a mistake? Like, we're kind of talking over each other a lot, and it wasn't very fluid, and we kept with it, and it improves, right? The more you iterate on it, the more you do it with someone, the more that you just practice,
The more you know their tendencies and when they like to start talking, when they like to stop talking. The important thing is knowing when they're done. So commentators in real life, they're there in real life. They can see them.
You can see each other.
I remember the first ones not being as good, and then they certainly got a lot better. I remember having some spectacular Smackdowns commentating sessions where it felt like...
It felt right.
It felt like you and I were actually professionals. Like, that's how it felt. And, like, after we'd finished doing it, I'd listened to it back, and I just thought, this is genuinely...
good content.
Yeah, top-tier content. Like, this is some of the best stuff I've ever done. And I thought, like... if Age of Empires 3 was an esport, you and I would be the... Like, we could do it. We would be we would be interesting to hundreds of thousands of people if it was, a big enough one.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I felt.
The Michaels and Collinsworth, as it were. Do you know who Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are?
I'm afraid not.
They're like an American sportscasting group team. Then they do, like, football games and stuff. Mostly they do NFL football games.
Yeah, there's a cultural barrier here. Especially because when you say football, I know what you're talking about, but football to me is
yeah. for you it's soccer.
Yeah. So there is that. Yeah, I used to look forward to SmackDown every single week. It was like the highlight of my week, and I couldn't wait to get back on what I would call, what I thought of as the casting table. And I think that the combo worked. As you mentioned, you were more analytical, and I was very in the moment. I like to talk about what's going on right now, and whilst I kind of, I had an understanding of the game, like, certainly you were the person that could talk about strategy more. And I think, that worked definitely very, very well for a while. And I think the big problem came, like, so my content on YouTube was always aimed more at very new players, right? And that was the audience that is actually the most prominent on YouTube, which is probably why my channel is as popular as it is. I never thought I'd get to 10,000 subscribers when I always thought it would be, nothing. But actually, I think something huge, like 70% of all of my views and all of my watch time, so 70% of everything on my channel is watched by people who do not subscribe. So there's a very small amount of people who actually are subscribed to my channel, who, where the watch comes from. And that tells me these people are very casual. These people are not a hardcore audience, and actually that's why these videos, like in almost every video I'd explain, going for the middle trading post on Great Plains is a good idea because you get the first pass of XP before the Travois man passes, and that's good for your 3 settlers. And there's only so many times, I think, on SmackDown
you can say that,
that I can say that, and that I can talk about why 300 wood, if you have that, is a good idea to go for a trading post in a house, or if you don't, if you start with coin, why you should get hunting dogs and buy wood, or something like that. There's only so many times, there's only so many ways you can play the same, or talk about the same matchup on the same map in Age of Empires 3, even though it is a very diverse game. And I think as the audience became more and more hardcore, especially when the transition from the official Age of Empires channel to not the official Age of Empires channel, when Steve left and we could no longer use that as well, I started to find commentating very daunting. I felt like the audience was significantly better than me at the game, and didn't appreciate... I think that is the... Like, I don't mean it... What am I trying to say? Didn't appreciate my style of doing things, or didn't find it useful, or like it was adding very much. And that, I felt like I didn't want to...
The following definitely got much more hardcore, right? There wasn't as broad of a spectrum of players. It was really just like the PR 25 plus crowd who already knew a lot of the stuff that your content liked to feature, right?
I think that's it. I started to not like commentating as much as before, I think is is it actually started to become quite difficult to be energetic.
Yeah, it started to feel a bit more like a chore, and I think that's what it was for me, right? It felt like for so much of SmackDown, I thoroughly enjoyed. Like you said, it was just like so much fun, and I enjoyed it so much. And near the end, like, it just felt like we've done this so many times. I've been through this big parade of like trying to get players and get everything lined up and get everyone here on time and coordinated and stuff like that. And it just felt like so much work, and I was using so much of my weekend to try and coordinate this thing. And I think it was just, I think for all parties, like for both you and me, it was good just to take a break, just to have a breath of fresh air. And I'm glad to see that there are people still holding the torch. There are still people continuing to cast and continuing to, stream their games and stuff like that, because I think it's really important to show Microsoft we are still interested in the game. There is still a following in Age of Empires in general, but it just got to be something that was very taxing. And it wasn't fun anymore. And I always said, when it stops being fun, I don't care if I'm casting to one person. If I'm still having the time of my life casting to that one person, I'm going to keep doing it. Right now, fortunately, there was more than one person watching. But at the same time, when I stop having fun with it, that's when it's time to hit the kill switch. And that's the point we got to.
Yeah, I think that's it. You finding it taxing, and me, like, I found it difficult to get my passion for it back. I actually remember in the one where H2O went against Lord Raphael, that
the winter one, I guess.
Yeah, that tournament I enjoyed casting a lot, and I think I found the spark that made me enjoy commentating and providing coverage for it. And then, SmackDown, there were a couple of really good ones after that tournament as well, but I think it did start to take its toll on both of us, as you mentioned. And I think I even mentioned to you a few weeks that I was considering telling you that I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then a couple of weeks later, you actually put out the post. And I didn't expect that to happen, but it also felt like that was coming.
It's a good time to end it, right? So
I think the question is, because you mentioned in this post on ESOC, for those that are listening and didn't realise, Zuta put out a forum post on the ESOC forums about a month ago, several weeks ago at least, certainly, saying all of this. This is not an announcement. This podcast, certainly. This has been news. This is old news. But this is the first time I've publicly spoken about it. And this is in great detail, actually. And I think this is a very, very nice way to talk about it. But the question is, Zuta, is SmackDown gone forever? And do you think that we'll do more commentary?
So I think SmackDown, in the format of you and I casting a single best of 7 every Saturday, I think that format is probably done.
I think it's used up.
I think I've used up that amount of energy and in that format, and we had a great time doing it. It was really good. I like to think that it provided a lot of content and a lot of insight for new players and people who have passion for the game. But realistically, I think that is done. Now, will I never stream Age of Empires, or will I never commentate events, tournaments, stuff like that? I still have every intention of continuing to do little stuff on the side, but it's not going to be with the same rigorous structure that we had with SmackDown, right? Whereas every week, best of 7, week after week after week.
And I think for me, I would like to cast tournaments still, and I'd like to be involved in that, but I don't know if it's ever going to go away, that feeling of it being daunting, and that I'm always worried about. I always felt like I'd be needing to check what I was saying. Is this right, Zuta? Like, making sure that I wasn't saying something wrong, and it was very difficult to make free-flowing commentary when it was like that. So that still is going to scare me when it comes to commentating Age of Empires 3, I think. I always like to mention the learning curve. I think, like, maybe now when I say that, people will have more of an appreciation of where I came from playing Age of Empires and where Zuta came from. So, with regards to commentary, I think I'd still like to do it.
Yeah.
And especially offline commentary, which is what I used to do all the time. I'd really like to do a Challenges of the New World Season 2. And Challenges of the New World, for those that don't know, is a series I did a long time ago where 2 players would play a best of 15. Not in one sitting, whenever they wanted to, but they would have to. The rules were they'd play every single vanilla civilization once. And there are 8 vanilla civilizations, so if you have to win 8 games, by definition that's a best of 15. That's what that was. And I'd like to do that again. But yeah, I'd like to do more of that. But that was very, very taxing, those videos. Like, I would often have several cuts in them, or I I'd perhaps commentate the whole thing and then just trash it. I'd can it because I didn't like how it turned out, and I'd do the whole thing again, and then maybe I'd come back to it the next day. And like I think I did a good job on those. The things that I do best, I think, for the community is the tips and tricks sort of style content where it's like I can be 100% certain that what I'm saying is completely factual and that I can present that information in a very nice, concise video. And that's the kind of thing that I like to do, and that there will be more of, I think. Those are the things that like, even if there's an audience or not, even if there's people playing or not, those videos are still going to get views because they're interesting, I think, for some reason. And on the off chance that a new player does stumble on them, and that doesn't seem like a very off chance, really, according to my YouTube stats, they're there. And that's really good for new players. But, yes, there'll be more Age of Empires 3 content from me. That's what I'm saying.
We aren't dead.